After Cat Logistics left Ilm to work on their massive delivery contract, the situation on board of the fleet could be described as a bit tense. Everyone was happy to receive a new ship, especially since it was in a mint-perfect condition, but minds of most of the crew were focused on something else. You see, despite being a ragtag band of losers from all walks of life, cart crews were surprisingly disciplined for Persian standards and generally followed orders and did their jobs without issues. But, despite that discipline, they were still just people, and people like to gossip, and by now Varuna's encounter with herself was blown out so much out of proportions that the rumors that circulated amongst the crew started getting a bit out of hand. What's more, the lieutenant couldn't really do anything without people bothering her all the time to explain it, even though Mr. Card did his best to try and stop his people from pushing the subject. Not that he did that very forcefully, though. After all, the company had a massive delivery contract to fulfill, and its CEO spent most of his time on the comm with Aurora Olympus, formerly of Olympus Construction Holding, discussing how to acquire the needed materials as cheap as possible, and then how to amass and deliver them without attracting attention of every single pirate in the sector. Fortunately, between Aurora's own experience and Mr. Cart's connections to the less savoury part of the trade network, it looked like the job would be as good as done, and everyone already rubbed their hands together, dreaming of incoming paycheck. That, however, meant that Varuna had to deal with all the unwanted attention from her crewmates alone, and often found herself swamped in unanswered comm requests and text messages. She did her best to ignore them until one day she retired to her cabin, only to find Zala, House, and, oddly enough, Herr Ludwig already sitting there. The lieutenant reached for her knife instantly, guided by old reflexes. It took her a lot of willpower to not swing it. "Okay, I can get why you two are here, but you?" she finally said, staring at Ludwig. "What the hell do you want?" Apologies for inconvenience, Madam Lieutenant," the cob drone said with genuine sympathy in his voice. "But Miss Zala and Mr. House mentioned that you may have some connections to Tritakian Corporation. Knowledge is very valued there, so I want to learn as much as I can during this trip." "You really think they'll let you—" Varuna started and then just gave up. She wondered how someone so naive and simple-minded survived to his age. "You know what, never mind. I'm not telling you anything anyway, so kindly fuck all the way off from my room and get back to your ships." Ludwig started getting up immediately, obedient as he was, but Zala pushed him back down. "Princess, in case you forgot we saved your life out there, the least we deserve for that is to know what we saved you from." "Saved my life?" Varuna scoffed. "If I remember correctly, you got your head smashed into a wall." "Well, yes, sure," Zala said, slightly taken aback. She still had a large purple bruise on her face from that encounter. "But House did save you, and I helped him." The old pirate nodded to that. "Not that you didn't put an impressive show, lass, but you still clearly needed help. Seems only fair for you to tell us what the hell happened there." "It doesn't matter. It won't happen again, and even if it will, I'll deal with it myself. Trust me, the less you know about all this, the better." "The better?" Zala sounded angry now. "Princess, you could have died down there. If not for the fact that Chief Cart suspected something and told us to prepare, you would have been a corpse by now, or a prisoner of that twin of yours." "Maybe, but that would still be better than just telling you what that was really about. Trust me, you don't want to get yourself tangled up in this." "We already are tangled in this, Missy," House said. "Besides, we don't want to know the truth just to satisfy our idle curiosity or something. Clearly you have problematic past, just like the rest of us, and if we don't know what it was, we won't be able to prepare for it in the future." "Believe me, your past is nothing compared to mine." Varuna wanted to continue, but Zala cut her off. "Oh, stop acting like you're some kind of special snowflake, Princess. You know full well you're not the only one with dark spots in your past. But unlike you, we were all open and honest about it. House may pretend to be a responsible father now, but he was a pirate, and a one who had a fallout with his own crew and that, which means that both his old pirate mates and all governments around the sector would love to see him dead. And he isn't the worst of us, cause, in case you forgot, I was a terrorist back in the day. At least House plundered posh merchants, but me? I blew up innocent civilians because I believed I was doing them a favor. Hell, I almost detonated myself on Tritakian Capital World, right in the middle of their main city. I'm only here because I plugged some wires wrong. And then I had the goal to cut ties and run, which means I too am not very welcome pretty much anywhere in this world. So don't you give me your bullshit sob stories and tell us what the hell went wrong with your past, so we can all sit down together and work out how to avoid getting killed by it. There was a moment of silence when everyone just stared at each other, and then Varuna just gave up. She reached past her uninvited guests, fished out a bottle of beer from her locker, and downed it in one go. Then she leaned against the cabin wall and slowly slid to the floor. Fine. I still think this is a bad idea, but for the sake of this company's safety, you're right. But before I tell you anything, you have to promise you won't say a word about any of this to any of the actually religious Luddites, understood? If someone like Brother Jesselton knew who is giving him orders every day, he'd probably lose his mind and try to kill me on the spot, and then I'd have to kill him in response. Sure thing, we can keep this between us, but it may not be that bad. Some Ludic followers are all about giving people second chances, especially people like you, who clearly had something to do with Tritakians and then left. Yeah, sure, they're willing to offer people a second chance, but as for me, well, despite how I look, I am not technically a human. The room went completely silent as Zala, House and Ludwig stared at Varuna with wide eyes. Finally, the corp drone managed to stutter. So, does that mean you're one of the AIs, Madam Lieutenant? Like those remnants we saw out there? What? No, not like that. Varuna shook her head and tension in the room lowered significantly. I'm a clone. Grown some 60 or 70 years ago in a vat in some Tritak black sites, far away from the core sectors. Now you see why Ludics wouldn't like me? Cloning, just like AIs, is an abomination to them. Yes, but there's literally no way to tell that you are one, Zala said. And besides, at least in my book, if you're a clone of another person, then you're still pretty much a human, just born differently. Well, that's the problem, the lieutenant sighed. The person, or creature I was based on wasn't a human either, not entirely. I don't know the details, the people who made me never talked about it, but the woman that 79 called Mother was some kind of experiment the company made. They wanted something that looked human and acted human, but without flaws and imperfections to serve them as unflinching, unquestionably loyal agents. Something that could walk the streets without attracting attention, but be able to do things not even the best conditioned secret operatives could. Infiltration, assassination, sabotage, all of it without any moral qualms. I don't know how long they worked on it, but it feels like this project started well over a century ago, maybe even more. Hell, the tech used for it was so advanced as a possibility they started working on it even before the gates went down. I know there were several labs working on that project, and one of them finally managed to grow a perfect copy of a human being. More than perfect, really. Something that not only had all human strengths, but also almost completely devoid of weaknesses, that could be felt to the brim with all the top-tech implants on the inside without any rejection. That person, or homunculus, or however you want to call it, was Mother. And apparently the company decided that she was so useful, they decided to make more of her, to use as their special agents all across the sector. That's where I came into existence, grown in a glass tank together with 19 others. We were the first batch. 20 of you. So that's why she called you 17. That was your number, right? And the other you said she was number 79. So that means there was a point when there were 80 of you out there. Someone would have noticed something, some automated system would have picked it up. No, it wouldn't, because out of every batch only 5 best clones were allowed to live after our training. From the day they dragged me out of the tank, they told me I had to compete with my sisters to prove myself, because at the end of our 10-year conditioning, the unfit ones would be recycled. For a decade, they not only encouraged us to compete for marks, they actively pushed us to sabotage each other. Only outright killing was forbidden, but aside from that, everything was a fair game. Hell, in my first year I blinded one of my sisters and cut another one's arms off. No wonder you survived then, Zala said, both impressed and disgusted. Oh, worry not, our handlers replaced their missing eyes and arms, and then they paired up together and broke my spine next year. My own handler was so angry that I fell into their trap that he left me lying there on the ground for almost a week before medical boats dragged me away. Said that at least I had resilience going for me if I managed to survive that long. Varuna went silent for a moment, staring at the floor. Zala fished out a flask from her coat, took a swig and then handed it to the lieutenant, who drank it almost instantly. Yeah, it's burnt a bit like that, only everywhere, and much more, she said. But as I said, they didn't permit us to die during training. But then, at the very end of it, after a decade of constant work and infighting, they locked us in a room and told us that only 5 of us could leave. I think you can picture what happened afterwards.
At least you survived,
House said.
I was thinking that maybe you could have banded together to break free, but if they conditioned you from day one to hate each other, then, well, I guess it wasn't pretty.
It wasn't. They didn't give us any weapons and the room was completely empty and even padded from roof to floor. So we had to use our hands and legs, and our teeth. But even more so, we were all excited to do this. I didn't know it until much later, but one of the implants they put into me when I was still in the vat blocked my brain from naturally producing serotonin and dopamine. They kept us permanently miserable and only disabled the implants for a few moments when we obeyed their orders. And when they locked us up in that room, they not only disabled them, they also activated other implant which completely flooded us with chemical happiness. We tore each other to shreds with smiles on our faces. Oh, I heard about that one, Ludwig said, proudly. It's quite common in the company now. Motivational misery, they call it. Every employee is regularly checked for their willingness to perform their duties for the company, and if they're found to be unhappy with their jobs, they're fitted with those implants, which are then linked to their managers or other superiors, who reward their employees for doing their jobs. Quite literally, everyone is happy with that deal. Do you have one of those implants, Herr Ludwig? Oh, no, of course not. One of the co-workers in my department went through the procedure, though. He used to always complain and question our superiors, but now he's the happiest and most fulfilled man I know. But I don't need such coercion. My family worked for the corporation for 5 generations now, and I don't need any chemical help to appreciate my job. Every day I woke up with nothing but motivation to do my best for the company and to be the best employee I can be and make my superiors proud. After all, even now I'm only here to accumulate more experience, which I could then use to become even better at my job. He said it so cheerfully, so eagerly that even Varuna, who thought she saw worst of the Persian sector, was disgusted. She wondered if Herr Ludwig wasn't perhaps a result of yet another cloning experiment. You know what, Corpo Man? Zala said, moving away from him. Every time you share your insider knowledge of the company, I think I maybe should reconsider that suicide bombing of Tritak HQ. Just saying. But carry on, Princess. Clearly you survived that Highlander match against your sisters, but what then? Yeah, I survived. Barely. Turns out if you aren't hard enough, you can rip someone's head off with just your hands. But as to what happened then, well, I began a job I was conditioned to do. They patched my wounds over the next week, and then I suddenly became Special Operations Agents of Tritakian Security Department. Had to kill my first target, some Ludic-affiliated smuggler, less than 2 weeks after me and my sisters ripped each other apart.
I have a feeling it wasn't a boring job.
Oh no, it wasn't. The company sent us on missions all the time, though mostly they weren't actual assassinations. Most of them were plain old sabotage. Tritak is a corporation and they want profits, so we were mostly used to maximize said profits. Let's say Hegemony amassed a massive orbital warehouse full of heavy weapons. In such case, one of us would be sent to blow such a warehouse up. And would you believe it, mere days after the goods were lost, Tritakian Corporation would swoop in and offer the exact same goods at a very profitable price. I think you understand what kind of job that was, but even more common was infiltration and information gathering. They made us all look like that for a reason. If a place or a person were too difficult to reach by any other means, we could always seduce our way in. People, even highest government officials, tend to be very talkative when they feel relaxed in bed. I would think so. So this is why I always thought you'd look perfect in a maid dress. You were literally made for it, Zala said with a smile, but went silent after Varuna threw her a death glare. They use it as a threat, you know. If we wouldn't perform to the standards company set for us, they'd recondition us into domestic servants. I'm sure I don't need to spell out what that means.
Did it happen to any one of you?
Number 3. We all thought she was the best one of us, but then she slipped up and failed to kill her target. Never saw her since, but it's also made me realize how I actually felt about that life. I don't know what exactly changed, what made me suddenly start to see clearly. Maybe there was some defect in my implant, or maybe in me myself. But all of a sudden I heard about 3 being decommissioned, and then I knew I had to get out of there and stop this. Yes, they kept us swimming in luxuries between missions, but it wasn't life. At any moment, some spreadsheet might have calculated a number slightly below average, and just like that I'd be gone. So I started to look for a way out. Quietly, of course. Fortunately, they made us smart enough to hide our true intentions. And judging by you being here, it succeeded. Unless it's some kind of extremely convoluted plan within a plan and you're still spying for them. Honestly, sometimes I think that too. But that would be madness even for Tritak. No, I broke away from them, though it took well over a decade. They kept us under such close watch that you wouldn't believe. The facility where we lived between missions turned out to be a massive modular starship, the layout of which changed every few days just to confuse us. It took me 4 months to even figure out how to leave my living quarters without tripping alarms and being noticed. Yes, they were very protective of their investment, Zala said. Oh yes, they were. 3 years it took me to figure out how to take that ship down, and that was just the first part. Then I had to figure out how to get down to the surface and blow up the facility where they made me. The one where the mother was and where dozens of my sisters were already growing in their vats. I could have just run away, sure, but I didn't want this madness to continue. Didn't want for others to go through this same life of a murdering tool. And I still can't believe I pulled it off. They kept such a close watch on us. I couldn't even make notes, so I had to memorize the entire plan. Even now, if I close my eyes, I can recite it. All 107 steps, from memory, complete with timestamps on when to make any move. But of course, that meant that while I was planning, I had to keep my head down and do what they wanted. So I was Tritakian good, obedient little murder doll, eagerly performing every order like a dog, until that one day when I finally was ready. Sabotaged the ship, went down, rigged the base to blow and fled, detonating both facilities at the same time. I always wondered if they realized before they evaporated who was responsible for their deaths. I hope my handler figured it out, the prick. Every day I was there, he called me Princess. House and Zala stared at each other, embarrassed. They both opened their mouths to say something, but Varuna silenced them with a wave of her hand. You couldn't have known, no harm done, she said, sounding more tired than angry. He probably just exploded before he realized what was going on, just like the rest of them. But it was a nice thought to have. And, well, then I fled, and the rest of the story I told you before was true. I was trained to be a killer, so I made up a story and joined Hegemony Navy, because that felt like some way to make amends. Back then I thought they were the good guys, trying to bring justice and order to the sector. Except that was a load of bullshit, and I left and did odd jobs until I met Mr. Cart. But I always felt accomplished, you know? I thought I at least did something right by blowing up that facility and preventing other clones from being made. Except now I know it didn't work, because some of them survived, or maybe there's more than one place where they made us. I don't know. So I guess we have some searching to do, Zala said. No, we don't. We can't fight Tritakian by ourselves, and besides, even if we blow up one of their plans, they'll just come up with another even more deranged one. I just want to be as far away from them as possible. There may be no good people in Persian sector anymore, if they were ever here to begin with, but sticking with at least semi-decent ones is enough for me. This unexpected and odd statement got the room quiet, as everyone there wondered if they even fitted into that semi-decent category, and so they sat there in silence, the broken, maimed pirate, half man and half machine, the runaway clone far away from the vat it crawled out of, a former religious fanatic who lost her faith and her future at the same time, and a corporate drone so in love with his masters he couldn't even begin to imagine that they never cared about him. But unfortunately, business never sleeps in Persian sector, and their quiet contemplation was interrupted by a fleet-wide message from their boss. "Oi, all ships, we'll be docking soon. Miss Olympus said that we should be able to pick up most of the materials for the contract here on this station, but we'll have to go through a bunch of small-time supplies if we want to get it done cheap. So get back to your posts, all of you. I need all socially capable people to go down there and do some shopping." Zala shook her head when she heard it. Well, that was enlightening talk, but I guess our chief's never-ending desire for credit is more important. Still, thanks for sharing, LT. Now I know why you always avoid getting ashore in Tritac ports.
Aye, no wonder you don't want to get spotted there. But if you ever find another one of your sisters, give me a call and I'll bring my coil gun.
House added. Sure, I'll do that. Thanks, people, but now I guess we need to get back to it. She got up from the floor and dusted off her uniform, watching her fellow commanders leave. Oddly enough, Herr Ludwig didn't say anything as he left, with a weird, oddly thoughtful look on his face. But there was no time to dwell on that. Moments later, more message came in, and Varuna rushed to the shuttle, ready to disembark and do Mr. Cart's shopping. It was an annoying experience, to say the least. 2 days of haggling with small-time black marketeers just to save a handful of credits. She'd be annoyed for this if not for the fact that she knew why her boss needed every escort they could get, for their expenses were certainly not something they could ignore. So, she and other crewmen from the company endured long hours of haggling and finally delivered all the goods to the ships and departed to deliver them to their mysterious client. This time, however, it seemed that the mystery would become even stranger. For when Cart Logistics arrived in the system their client marked for them, the very moment they emerged from the jump point, alerts started blaring on all ships. "What the hell?" Varuna said, looking at Sensor's console. She didn't expect to see those signatures again. "There's more remnants here. All ships go dark and prepare for evasive maneuvers and emergency escape jump. This is a trap!" "Belay that last part, people," Mr. Cart said sternly over the fleet-wide comm. "Go dark, but don't jump anywhere. This isn't a trap, it's our client's escorts." There was a good 10 seconds of dead silence on all comms, until finally Varuna said, "Escorts? Do you mean to say that our client's escorted by those bloody machines?" "Of course not," her boss scoffed. "This is nothing but a ruse to keep unwanted guests away. These are just regular ships, but their transponders must have been modified to make them look like remnants at a distance. Besides, if these really were the machines, do you think they'd just ignore us like they're doing right now?" That gave Varuna a bit of a pause. "Well, no. But I wish you told us beforehand what we'd be getting into. I almost got a heart attack when I saw those signatures all around us." "Yeah, I should have said something true. But the client insisted I'd keep it quiet, so I did. Anyways, there's no need to panic, but do keep our emissions to the minimum anyway. We don't want to attract any unnecessary attention. You never know who may be watching. Now, set course for those coordinates. We're to eject our supplies there." "Eject? Weren't we supposed to deliver those materials somewhere?" "Yes, but the client probably wants to pick them up once we're gone. Guess she's more secretive than I thought." "She?" Varuna said with a raised eyebrow. "So you know the client is a woman?" No," Mr. Cart said, mostly truthfully. "I just started thinking about the client as of a woman after seeing all those secrets and precautions they're taking. You know, it feels like feminine subtlety." "Right, if you say so, boss. Just make sure we get paid," Varuna said, and made a mental note to investigate this further at later time. Something was very clearly wrong here. "Don't worry, I will. We're not a charity after all. Now, all crews go to cargo base and prepare to eject all cargo pods that were marked for our client. We are to drop them off deeper in the system and leave so our benefactor can pick them up without any prying eyes around." And that was precisely what happened. 2 days later, Cart Logistics left a cloud of cargo containers floating in a seemingly unremarkable part of the system, and mere minutes later, their account was boosted by well over 200,000 S-creds. There was even a bonus, so high that Mr. Cart immediately transferred 100 creds to every single crew member, causing a fleet-wide celebration. Alright, stop calling me with thanks. If anything, you should be thanking our client, he said a few hours later as another drunken crewman called him on the comm. And besides, don't celebrate just yet. We'll get a proper shore leave when we're back in the Corps in a few days, but until then, keep your wits about you. The crews listened and everything was okay. The contract was fulfilled, the payment was delivered, and Cart Logistics jumped out of the system, wondering what other jobs their new employers would provide them. Everything was fine until, very abruptly, it wasn't. As soon as the fleet jumped out of the system, Brother Jesselton, who was manning the censored, fired off a fleet-wide alarm. "Something's coming for us, Lieutenant!" he shouted to Varuna and pointed at the screen. "And it's moving fast, very fast!" She looked at the console and indeed, the contact was there, but whatever it wasn't built in the sector. Nothing she has ever seen or heard of could move that fast, not even top-secret Tritac prototypes she remembered. It felt like the sensors themselves had trouble to even lock onto this thing. "We can't lock onto it!" she shouted and slammed the red alert on her console. "Everyone, prepare for trouble!" But as soon as she said that, the entire ship went dark. There was a brief, terrifying moment of silence before old backup generator turned on and some lights came back on. "We lost contact with other ships," Jesselton reported, clearly terrified, but doing his best to control it. "And our internal comms, and most of our systems. We're barely moving right now." "We need to fix this. First alert team to engines, second team to comms, now!" Varuna shouted and then jumped out of her chair. "Jesselton, you have the helm, keep everything working." The man tried to protest, but Varuna already rushed out of the bridge, pushing past several confused crewmates who were trying to get to emergency stations. She elbowed her way through them and ran straight to Captain's quarters, for she knew that if something damaged the ship, her boss would feel it as well. She punched emergency code into door console, ran into Mr. Cart's quarters, fully expecting the worst, but saw him still up, desperately holding onto piloting controls. "You alive, boss?" she shouted, rushing to his side. "No," he replied in a weak voice, "but I'll manage. We need to get out of here. This thing almost shut me down completely." "We can't," Varuna replied and took a step back. When Mr. Cart was talking, he sounded relatively normal, but when he wasn't, the sounds coming from under the helmet were inhuman. Still, she steeled herself and continued. "Whatever it was, it overloaded everything, including engines. We only have maneuvering thrusters up." Mr. Cart tried to reply to that, but then another pulse came in, and the ship went dark again. In the pitch-black darkness of the cabin, Varuna heard her boss falling to the ground with a loud clang. Fortunately, the backup generator was still up, and as soon as the light came back up, she helped lift him up, once again trying to not listen to the noises he made. "These can't be pirates, they would have broadcasted some demands by now," she said, but her boss didn't respond. And, just for a brief moment, Varuna could swear she heard something else, a barely audible voice coming from inside her boss's helmet. "They hunt us," it said, or so Varuna thought. Even later, she couldn't be sure if she didn't imagine that. "The pulse," Mr. Cart finally said, facing his second-in-command. "Fire off the interdictor pulse. It should be tied to emergency generator. It may buy us some time." Varuna didn't hesitate. She reached past her boss and flicked the switch on the console. For the next few seconds, the ship made a sickly, groaning noise and then released a wave of charged energy in all directions. For about a minute, nothing happened and everyone prepared for the worst, but then lights came back online. "Zala to second chance, come in second chance," a voice could be heard on the comm immediately. "Our comms are back online, are you alive?" "We are," Varuna replied. She then took a look at her boss, noticed that he was still breathing and added, "All of us, fortunately. Do you have those bastards who did it to us on the sensors?" "Well, yes and no. Zala replied, sounding confused. We have them, but they're leaving just as fast as they came here. No ship should be able to move that fast after being pulsed. Clearly no one told them that, Varuna said, annoyed. Never mind, raise all other ships and if they're okay, tell them to fall in formation. We're getting the fuck out of here. Aye aye, Lieutenant, Zala replied and shut the comm. I think that's the first time she called you by your rank, Mr. Katz said, still weak but sounding a bit better now. Maybe. Never mind that, what the hell just happened to us? Boss, ever since you got us tangled with this mysterious client of yours, things are getting weirder by the day. What the hell was that out there? And once again, as she said that, she could swear some other voice was talking. Mr. Katz sat quietly for a few seconds and then finally nodded, as if coming to some internal conclusion. I have no idea, he answered truthfully. But if there's anyone who knows what that was, it's the people from the academy. Good. Let's pay them a visit then, Varuna said, but her boss already turned around on his chair and started punching in new coordinates. She looked at him concerned and wondered. He never hid anything from her, not even the most outlandish truth. The fact that he was lying right now meant that something was going horribly wrong, and she wondered what got her boss so jumpy and secretive all of a sudden. Not for the first time, she realized just how little she really understood about this man, and wondered if she wouldn't be able to help him somehow, but at the same time, also hoped that she wouldn't be forced to rethink her loyalties in the coming weeks.